Hello everybody and welcome to the Quilter's Apothecary. In our workshops and tutorials, we talk a lot about building our muscle memory on paper to help us develop our skills as a surface quilter. It's one of the most important tools that we have at our disposal. It's inexpensive, it's on paper, we can do it right in front of our TV, but there are a few extra things that go along with that, especially when you start moving into a more custom type quilting. So let's take a few minutes and talk about that. I've always thought of surface quilting as its own form of performing arts. And with any sort of performing arts, you definitely have to have rehearsal. Just as we wouldn't expect a stage performer to go into opening night having not rehearsed their lines, an experienced surface quilter would as well have planned and auditioned a design before applying it to a quilt. One of the things we need to remember is that with our more extreme or custom designs, it can be very cumbersome to use our traditional long arm rulers to sit and practice with. And so years ago I actually developed my own tools to sit and draw with so that I could come up with new designs. And a lot of people have asked if I would make them available, and I have made them available now. So let's go take a look at some of these tools which I think will change your quilting life. Our first grouping of specialty rulers are our mystical shapes. We use these for actually drawing and auditioning designs on paper, but also utilizing them with chalk or whatever marking tool you like to mark with right on your surface of your quilt. One of our first rulers in the shape series is our ovals. Now the one thing I want to clarify before we actually go any further is with the shape rulers, the one thing that I would never do with these is use these on a quilting machine around a foot. These are too thin, and actually I know that a lot of makers will make these 1/4 inch thick so that they say you can use them around a foot. Frankly, I find that irresponsible. I find it dangerous to utilize a ruler that way that would be this narrow. As you can see, when we look at these rulers, they are narrow. Now actually the backing of these is brown paper, and you just peel that off and then they're clear, and all of ours have the marks lasered right into the ruler. So the ovals have of course a cross as well as an X for dividing for some of those specialty wreaths that I like to teach in the shapes class and the rulers class and illusions. So that's one of the first rulers in the series of shapes. The second shape I want to show you is our circles. Now just as with the ovals, the etching on these is going to be a T as well as an X. So you have a lot of dividing options when you're actually marking for specialty wreaths or orbs or any sort of shapes like that. The other thing is when I'm not using these and I'm putting them away after whether I've marked a quilt or if I am using them for drawing, I like to use our red tape, and I very simply just tape across. That way I'm not going to lose any pieces. Our next shape is our mystical shape star, which actually has a little bit wider spikes to come out, so that way we can fit some beautiful feathers in here a little easier than something that would be a little bit more narrow. And of course we have our wonderful marks that go out so that way you can divide your space evenly. Many of you know that when I am doing any sort of stars on a quilt, especially if it's for adults or patriotic quilts, or even space quilts or up in the sky type work on a quilt, I don't like to utilize the school star that does that. I prefer an adult star, and I like to save the other ones for children's quilts. And this is one of my absolute favorite shapes. I use this an awful lot on quilts, especially with the interest in the patriotic sort of quilts. Our next drawing ruler in our shape series is our standard hexagon, and again with dividing lines for some of those special designs that we go over in shapes and the rulers class. The other thing that I want to mention as with the stars and the diamonds and some of these other shapes that we're showing you, is any design that has a straight line, we often get requests to do solid series of, for example, this hexie. I would never make a solid series of this hexie because very simply, once you mark this hexie and all of its different sizes and you choose the size that you want, then very simply what I would do after I mark it is I would use a ditch ruler to actually follow that line. There would be no reason to spend all the money that would have to be spent on a set of solid hexies. So along with the regular hexie shape, we also have in the hexie family our wonderful stout hexie, which I absolutely love. It's a little bit shorter on the vertical, and of course you can turn these any way to mark them, and I'm in the midst of using these for a lot of border treatments. I tend to be hooked on this one right now, which I absolutely love, and it is a wonderful addition to our shapes family. Another one of our more popular shapes is our diamond shape, and our diamond actually comes in 3 different shapes of diamonds. Our most popular is the standard diamond shape, which I love to use for border treatments as well as block treatments and some of those wonderful medallion shapes. This shape is perfect when you want a perfect square. So when you're drawing and you want to audition different block designs on paper, it's wonderful to have this set for that. But also, if you're going to be putting a lopsided square inside of another square, you can utilize these to mark those. And I also like to mark a perfect square in some of our modern quilts where there's a lot of open space. And of course, in border treatments such as the one showing here. Another shape in our collection is our wonderful pyramid or triangle. This is actually an equilateral triangle, and we have, of course, our division marks in the center so that you can divide the space properly in case you want to make some of these wonderful triangle designs. Here we have the Composer Series ruler, and it comes in yellow as well as clear. I prefer the yellow personally because I can see the lines better on white paper when I'm actually doing my drawing and auditioning and creating works for my portfolio for clients to look at. It's just a little bit easier for me to see the yellow rather than the clear for marking on white paper. And since this is a drawing ruler, that's why we have it in the yellow. Now the first one is the 45 drafting ruler in the Composer series, and it mimics the same thing that our Mystical 45 would create on a quilt, as well as our Ditcher 2, because our Ditcher 2 as well has 45-degree lines on it. Our next ruler in the Composer series would be our curves, and of course that would mimic our Mysticurve 1 rulers, as well as our Mysticurve 2 rulers. And this is wonderful, of course, as we've seen on the tutorials as well as in classes for doing our practice with continuous curve, but also for undulating curves in the border on paper if we want to audition different designs. And of course, on this particular Composer Series ruler, we have the shape and the size of a large, as well as, on the other side, the curve of a small Mysticurve. Our next Composer Series ruler is our arc. And if you notice, you actually have 2 arcs. And this is to mimic the small as well as the medium arc. What we've done with the drawing version is we've actually, this is a constrained version, so we've actually shrunk the dimensions, but actually it is equal to this, even though it's been shrunk, so it's constrained properly, so that when you practice it on paper, you can mimic that design on your quilt. It's just that it would actually be a little bit larger. And that way you can still utilize this for 8.5 by 11 paper rather than have to constantly use large poster board. Now also what I want you to notice about this is with our regular arc shapes, we have the nesting area down here, the stopper, which we would use for our 1/4 inch ruler foot. Now on the Composer Series ruler, we also have the same thing going on, but we actually have created that for a like a fine tip Sharpie marker, or a pencil or pen, whatever you'd like to use. So we actually have a place right down there that you can soak right down and get right in there when you're actually auditioning your border designs and block designs using this ruler on paper. This ruler in our Composer series actually mimics on paper, and again, it's been constrained and shrunk. Dimensionally, it's exactly the same proportion as its actual long arm ruler, the V. And the stopper on this, of course, is this wonderful thing that most of you are familiar with as you've used it. And we also have the same thing up here on this one. Now, when you take this ruler and you flip it, the other side is going to be the slim arc. And again, it's been constrained and shrunk so that you can use all these rulers together in smaller versions on paper so that you can audition without having to buy poster board all the time. And this is the V version of the Composer Series ruler. One of my favorite of the Quilter's Apothecary ruler series is the Designer. And we also have one of those in the Composer series for taking along for doing your drawing. And of course, you've seen some of the tutorials on these, and you've taken some of the classes with this particular ruler. And you have seen the wonderful medallions that you can create with this. Also, the thing that I like about the actual ruler itself for using, we have a larger size of this one, is you can create from the center out radiating lines equally divided, and they go down pretty small, and I absolutely love this for doing that type of work or the medallion type of work. This is our wonderful multi-ruler, which we utilize in our Composer series set of rulers. And with this, because we have the squares, the circles, the hexes, the triangles, which we use for flying geese, and even some smaller curves if we want to do some smaller type curve shapes with our drawing, would mimic and audition what we would do with our inside shapes, such as the hexagons. We've got the circles. We've got, of course, the inside flying geese, our diamonds, our ovals. We have a bunch of different inside shapes, and there's always more coming out with these. But it's nice to have this wonderful multi-tool to audition different border designs, as you've seen in some of the tutorials that we've done for borders, as well as some of the flight path shapes in a few of our tutorials with the different inside shapes. When I'm done with my drawing session in front of the TV, or if I'm going to pull these out and actually mark a quilt, I make sure to put them all back in one space so that I can grab them to go. If I'm traveling somewhere, I make sure to put something on the bottom. You can get these bins, these wonderful plastic bins at any craft store. And I'm just going to load these in. That way I know where all of my marking tools are. If I want to put a little protection in there, I could use a little bit of bubble paper. Load everything up along with my favorite pens or marking tools, as well as some drawing tablets, and then you're ready to go. I always look for the ones with handles. And now I can take this anywhere and work on my quilting designs. I hope you have a wonderful time when you get your drawing tools with the whole creative process. And be well, take care of each other, and we will see you down the road.